Turbulence blowing the dress blue cap off one of the Marines' heads. Well, the president walked over to pick it up, put it back on, and it blew off again. But, a lot of folks think that's very classy that the commander-in-chief would stop and try to help the gentleman in service to our country.
Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption, once and for all, and corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe even possible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong. At least they must have known. They do nothing about it. They're lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption, and there are plenty of them. Fifth, we will launch a major crackdown on government leakers who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy. When possible, we will press criminal charges. Sixth, we will make every Inspector General's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. Seventh, I will ask Congress to establish an independent auditing system to continually monitor our intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens or running disinformation campaigns against the American people, or that they are not spying on someone's campaign like they spied on my campaign. Eighth, we will continue the effort launched by the Trump administration to move parts of the sprawling federal bureaucracy to new locations outside the Washington swamp. Just as I moved the Bureau of Land Management to Colorado, as many as 100,000 government positions could be moved out, and I mean immediately, of Washington to places filled with patriots who love America, and they really do love America. Ninth, I will work to ban federal bureaucrats from taking jobs at the companies they deal with and that they regulate. So they deal with these companies and they regulate these companies, and then they want to take jobs from these companies. It doesn't work that way. Such a public display cannot go on. It is taking place all the time, like with Big Pharma. Finally, I will push a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on members of Congress. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Thank you very much. They cannot stand that they do not own me. I don't need them. I don't need anything about them. I don't need their money. They cannot steer me. They cannot shake me, and they will never, ever control me, and they will never, ever, therefore, control you. At the end of the day, anyone else will be intimidated, bought off, blackmailed, or ripped to shreds. I alone will never retreat, and that is why we must stand together and charge. We have to charge full speed ahead.
Offer me money. Offer me power. I don't care.
So you just don't care. You want to share what you have to say.
I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it.
Every 4 years, we gather on these steps to carry out the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. And we are grateful to President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama for their gracious aid throughout this transition. They have been magnificent. Thank you. Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. And tonight I'm also making another promise to protect Americans from government tyranny. As your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Do you know about that?
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
I guess the other question is, to follow up on Victoria's question, do you believe that the president has the power to fire or demote you, and has the Fed determined the legality of a president demoting at will any of the other governors with leadership positions?
Not permitted under the law.
Not what?
Not permitted under the law.
Thank you.
Today's topic, Dr. Paul and I noticed that Fed Chair Powell was asked, if President Trump asks you to resign, will you? And he flat out says, no, I will not. The law says that the president can't fire me. And right away, my mind says, law says. Well, there's a higher law, the supreme law of the land, that everybody raises their right hand, they swear an oath to. It's called the U.S. Constitution. And that law never gave any authority to the federal government to create a monopoly central bank that can manipulate interest rates and counterfeit money. Counterfeiting is a crime. So the government created this bank that counterfeits. That's the law. The Fed should not exist according to the law. But Powell, he didn't mention any of this. And of all monopolies to give, this isn't a monopoly to create milkshakes for people. This is money. This is a part of every single transaction in our nation that they gave them a monopoly. It's astounding. So he's saying, no, the president, because of the law, can't fire me. That's not even the issue here. The issue is the existence of the Federal Reserve. And that, while that may not be addressed today, it will be someday. And we say the sooner the better. Is that right, Dr. Paul?
Absolutely. They're going to continue to mess around with that. But your point is perfect, and that is, how can they be so choosy? I can't do that under the law. So and your point is right. They're pointing out that the laws, the arbitrary laws that they write that do not follow the rules of the Constitution or natural law, it becomes the law because they've instituted. And, the worst part about this is that they cling to that like it's a biblical message. I mean, it is ingrained in them because they don't for a minute think, we have a little trick here we're going to play on the people, because they've talked themselves into believing that the Constitution is dangerous if it's overly rigid. So here's a perfect example of this, where they arbitrarily pick what is legal and what is not. The constitutional restraint against, a central bank, there's no authority for that, is one thing that they totally ignore.
Yeah, ultimately the Federal Reserve cares about its own survival, itself, and the biggest bank. It's the biggest banks. I mean, that's what it's there for. It's a cartel of the biggest banks that has a government privilege, which it should not have. So their ultimate priority is themselves. And this is wrong, because everybody else, including us, is lower on the totem pole of their priorities. So this power should not exist. And as long as the Fed does exist, we can't have a genuinely free society, free economic life. It's impossible. You can't have a monopoly central bank. You need sound money for freedom. So, but people need to understand this. Not many do, more than ever, thanks to Dr. Paul. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and people can ultimately understand it. I mean, look what happened with the open border. People finally understood, we have to stop this. And they voted for it. So people can, over time, see the problems and get the right solutions and understand. So that's the goal. And ultimately, the Fed will face some type of public backlash. When that day comes is anybody's guess. It could be a long time from now, it could be a short time from now. But the goal is to educate people so they want sound money, they understand the problem, and then finally the Fed will be gone.
Oh, wonderful. We ought to stop right there. So you're positive of that. You'll guarantee it, won't you? Well, in a way, we can, if we continue to do what we're doing now, there are some things that you could almost guarantee. Well, one thing is, if the central bank is permitted to permit money at will and to cover all government debt, you can assume that the value of the currency is going to go down and prices will go up. That's not real complicated. The answers are not confusing. The founders are on the right track. They knew what honest money was about. We should follow the path of the money and recognize that creating money does not create wealth. Productivity creates wealth, and that's a different story. In freedom, you have the maximum amount of productivity and the maximum amount of prosperity.
Is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Federal Reserve is the culprit. It has delivered this crisis to us. The Federal Reserve's low interest rate policy is a big mistake. It is not a panacea. Artificially low interest rates are achieved by inflating the money supply. Low interest rates penalize the thrifty, and those who save are cheated. It promotes consumption and borrowing over savings and investing. Manipulating interest rates is an immoral act. It is economically destructive. The policy of artificially low interest rates caused our problems and therefore cannot be the solution. The market rate of interest is crucial information for the smooth operation of the economy. A central bank setting interest rates is price fixing and is a form of central economic planning. Price fixing is a tool of socialists and destroys production. Central bankers, politicians, and bureaucrats can't know what the proper rate should be. They lack the knowledge and are deceived by their own aggrandizement. Manipulating the money supply and interest rates rejects all the principles of the free market. Ironically, free markets and sound money generates low rates, but unlike the artificially low rates orchestrated by the Fed, this information conveyed is beneficial to investors and savers. The Congress, by conceding this authority, conveys extraordinary economic powers to the elite few. This is a power that has been abused throughout history. Only the Federal Reserve can inflate the currency, creating new money and credit out of thin air, in secrecy, without oversight or supervision. Inflation facilitates deficits, needless wars, and excessive welfare spending. Debasing a currency is counterfeiting. It steals value from every dollar earned or saved. It robs the people and makes them poorer. It is the enemy of the working person. Inflation is the most vicious and regressive of all forms of taxation. It transfers wealth from the middle class to the privileged rich. The economic chaos that results from a policy of central bank inflation inevitably leads to political instability and violence. It is an ancient tool of all authoritarians. Inflating is never a benefit to freedom-loving people. It destroys prosperity and feeds the fires of war. It is responsible for recessions and depressions. It's deceptive, addictive, and causes delusions of grandeur with regards to wealth and knowledge. Wealth cannot be achieved by creating money by fiat. It instead destroys wealth, and it rewards the special interests. Depending on monetary fraud for national prosperity or a reversal of our downward spiral is riskier than depending on the lottery. Inflation has been used to pay for all the wars and empires, and they all end badly. Inflationism and corporatism engenders protectionism and trade wars. It prompts scapegoating, blaming foreigners, illegal immigrants, ethnic minorities, and too often freedom itself for the predictable events and suffering that results. Besides, the whole process is unconstitutional. There is no legal authority to operate such a monetary system. So let's stop it. Let us restore a policy of prosperity, peace, and liberty. The time has come. Let's end the Fed. Back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Hare, Illinois. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
He's not going to be president. Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank. Okay. I guarantee it.
All right.
I think if he becomes the president, he'll make it great because the states is already great.
I think that man will be president of the United States right about the time that spaceships come down filled with dinosaurs and red capes.
On that note, Tom.
Take it from me. How about that?
Cheers, Tom.
And then, of course, there's Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
Donald Trump, just last week, he confirmed to the National Review that he is again considering a run in 2016.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it. I will personally write you a campaign check now on behalf of this country, which does not want you to be president, but which badly wants you to run.
So when you stand and deliver that State of the Union address, in no part of your mind or brain can you imagine Donald Trump standing up one day and delivering a State of the Union address?
Well, I can imagine it in a Saturday night skit. I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
He will never be president of the United States.
And we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next. I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
Next.
Okay, here we are. And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones, right now, Donald Trump.
And so, right now, Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say, you're not going to be president, all right? It's been fun. It's been great. I love you. But come on, buddy. All, let's say, cow poo-poo aside, there is zero chance we'll be seeing you being sworn in on the Capitol steps with your hand on a giant golden Bible.
I'll make a prediction, though, for you. And I don't really get into predictions much, but this one I'll go way out on a limb. Donald Trump will never, ever be president of the United States. That Trump should not be in this race. He's an absurdity. He is a travesty.
Donald Trump will never be elected president of the United States.
Donald Trump is the here today, gone tomorrow candidate for President of the United States. Donald Trump is not going to be President of the United States. Ever respectful of the fact that the people have not voted, he's not going to be President of the United States.
Let's be clear. Donald Trump will lose the election.
I mean, he had a really good chance to be different and really have a chance to change things, but he doesn't do the work. He's lazy.
We talk about him every day, and we continuously bash him.
He's not going to be the president. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
And we're coming to a point where if you're Hillary Clinton, you're honestly probably starting to think about not just whether you will win, but how big your win will be.
And then you say that Donald Trump has the best day in the entire world, completely outperforms expectations, and he wins all of the toss-up states. He wins all 5 of those states, plus that electoral college vote in Maine that he's after. If he wins all of the toss-ups, which would be insane because nobody wins all of the toss-up states, even if Donald Trump did win all of the toss-up states, he would still lose.
To be a wake-up call to the Republican Party. Despite Boris thinking that Donald Trump could win New York, the presidential race is over.
Could I just cut through? I have one thing to say, one thing only, and that is that this race is over. Tomorrow morning, the money will dry up. The Republicans will start to hide. Trump has no place to go. This race, effectively, as of tonight, is no longer a presidential race. I mean, everything I know about presidential politics, and I've been through 5 of them, I've never seen one like this. This race is over. You might as well accept it. And the question now is, how do you minimize damage? And the only way you can do that, it seems to me, is to try to grab hold of some old conservative value things and do what Mondale did in '84, which was try to save a few people down ballot. But as far as Donald Trump's concerned, it will never, ever, ever happen.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down as a president.
Questions at the Pentagon. I don't know at what level this is. It just seems like it's informal discussions. I guess it's understandable they would have those discussions. It also... Scott, is it?
Look, I don't like this because what's Donald Trump supposed to think? You know, he's sitting down there, he's the president-elect, and now he's got to read in the newspaper tonight that the unelected bureaucracy of the federal government is having meetings at some level about how to thwart or countermand the commander-in-chief. I don't care if it's at the Pentagon or at the HUD or Ag Department. It doesn't matter. The unelected bureaucracy of this government answers to the civilian and duly elected leadership that we just did. And what if you were in his shoes and you just won the popular vote with a clear mandate and now you got to read that these unelected bureaucrats are plotting against you? What would you think? If they have problems, let me finish. If they have problems, they should not have meetings that then leak to the press. If they have ideas or things, they should call the president's office and say, hey, we'd like to have some discussions for planning purposes. But secret meetings that leak? Terrible way to get off to a start with the new administration.
Well, I agree that that's maybe not the best way to do it. However, Trump has set them up to be in this situation where they think that he's coming after them.
CNN and others are all reporting the Pentagon's been having secret meetings about how they're not going to follow orders of Trump. And now remember, Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, famously called the communist Chinese and said, don't worry, Trump doesn't have the nuke codes. He's not in command, which is a military coup in waiting, and administratively and diplomatically is a coup over the presidency and over the people. And now you've got bills introduced by Senator Blumenthal, a bill that during insurrection, during uprisings they promise they're going to have, if he gets into office, all the different Democrats have been saying it, as you know, that they have a bill to strip the president of domestic use of military. So they're planning to stir something up where that would be needed. And that would be a legislative coup over the executive there as well and over the people. So the unelected bureaucracy of this government answers to the civilian and duly elected leadership. Elon Musk joined Trump for a call with Zelensky. Here are the articles. It was just leaked on CNN that unelected officials at the Pentagon are already holding secret meetings on what to do if Donald Trump issues orders they don't agree with. Some of those orders include using active duty military assigned to carrying out mass deportations and fire corrupt actors currently in the U.S. government. Why have our politicians allowed these unelected bureaucrats to hold so much power? I hope Trump fires them all. Yeah. And remember what Hillary said a few months ago. I'm not going to bore you with the clip. If you want to find it, it's on In Wokeness. I've already played this like 10 times. I don't know if we really understood how important Elon Musk is to free speech, said Chad Johnson. In Wokeness, Hillary Clinton, we lose control if social media stops censoring content. Turns out she was right.
You know, I always say there's an enemy from within and there's an outside enemy. And if you're smart, the outside enemy is not going to be a problem. Russia, China, North Korea, we're not going to have a problem if you have a smart president. If you have not such a smart president, then it's a problem. But we have an enemy from within, which I think is much more dangerous than the outside enemy. We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. We can make these the 4 greatest years. We'll turn it around so fast that your head will spin.
Is that to you?
Well, I am a little concerned, honestly, if the federal bureaucracy, whether it's in the Pentagon or any other agency, is already having discussions about how to countermand the commander-in-chief. I mean, let's remember how this works. He got elected president. He's the commander-in-chief. He gives the orders. They follow them. And so I don't like the idea, candidly, Wolf, of non-elected government people at any level having meetings with each other about how to thwart the duly elected president of the United States. So I'm really hoping that when Donald Trump names his nominee for the Pentagon, and then they take office and you have your National Security Council in place, that we have a much better working relationship between the White House and the Pentagon than what I'm reading tonight, which is one part of the federal government already having some kinds of meetings about what it would look like to thwart the president. That's not a good way to start.
But let me follow up, Scott. Let me follow up with you, because Trump, as president, will be the commander-in-chief. But what these Pentagon officials are considering right now and discussing among themselves, what if he gives the Pentagon, the U.S. military, illegal orders to do certain things? What do they do then?
My advice to them would be, instead of talking to each other, talk to the president and talk to his senior staff. Because look what's happened. They're having these meetings. Now it's out in the open. I mean, what is Donald Trump supposed to think now? You've already got the government, the bureaucracy, plotting against you or thinking the worst of you. So to me, the best thing that could happen here is for them to talk to each other, meaning the Pentagon people and the president and his team. That's what really ought to happen. So I hope these secret meetings that now somehow find their way into the press, that really needs to stop, and we need more communication between the
Whoopi Goldberg talking about your moral compass. Did any of you guys ever seen the clip when she defended Roman Polanski? And she literally says what he did wasn't rape. Roman Polanski raped a 13-year-old. And she publicly defended him on the air and said it wasn't rape. It was statutory rape.
She's 13. She was 13.
Yeah, 13 is
okay.
considered not
Until it's
rape
your
to
daughter.
Whoopi. So that's, look, man, the Cheneys are your center of your moral compass. The people who are in the business of murdering babies, that's your and listen, the only thing, by the way, I know it's election day and everyone's just all in for their people, and I understand that. But I just hope if you guys keep this in mind, okay? You know how much you hate Whoopi Goldberg, who's praising Liz Cheney right now? Okay, Liz Cheney is Hillary Clinton, is Nikki Haley, is Mike Pompeo, is all of the neocon warhawks. They're exactly the same. And just so you understand, who the neoconservatives are the American vanguard of the Israeli lobby. That's who they are, okay? Now, you may know that or you may not know that, but I promise you, go read some books about it, and I'm right. Fuck all of these wars. America is not threatened by anyone, okay? We have 2 giant oceans around us, a gigantic nuclear arsenal, and the most badass military force in the history of the world. No one poses a threat to us. The idea that anyone can even convince you that Iran poses some threat to the United States of America, the country that doesn't have nuclear weapons or an air force capable of delivering them here if they were to develop them, all these wars are bullshit. fuck the wars, support peace and free markets and laissez-faire government and prosperity. That's the key to American success. It's why we're the greatest country in the world. And man,
I think that Xi Jinping knows those politicians don't really run jack shit. It's what Trump likes to call the deep state. The deep state real. It's real. There's a bunch of people that run the government.
Who are they, though?
Well, there's a lot of money. There's heads of immense corporations that have incredible financial control and influence on politicians. This is the reason why lobbyists are some of the richest fucking people in the country. Like some of the richest real estate is in Virginia, right outside of D.C., and a lot of it's lobbyists. The amount of money that they pour into campaigns and pour into making sure that their agendas are being met and that their businesses get to grow because of regulations or lack of regulations or tariffs or lack of tariffs or whatever the fuck they're trying to do. That's who runs things really and makes decisions. And then the politicians keep us embattled in these social squabbles. It's like when Kamala Harris had this guy in a dress with a beard come to the White House recently, and she's oh my God, for Pride Month, come on in, you're in the White House. Like that is to accentuate the social squabbling. It's so people get fired up, yay, queers are in the White House, and then other people go, what the fuck are queers doing in the White House? It's like that. This is a part of the grand plan to keep people not paying attention to the really important issues, and to just constantly, it's like these fucking beach balls they throw up at a concert. They constantly get thrown up.
It's working too.
Gay marriage. They're going to take away gay marriage now. They're going to take away abortion. They're going to take away this. Guns, the border. And they just keep throwing these things in the air. So you're just like looking left and right and looking left and right. And while this is going on, there's all sorts of laws being passed that allow them to look at any computer, any laptop, any phone. They're going to be able to bypass encryption with AI. I was just watching a video where a security expert was talking about that. He was talking about, what's that guy's name? Rob Braxman. He was talking about how AI in your operating system, like once they get AI in your operating system, all this stuff like Signal and WhatsApp, encrypted end-to-end encrypted devices, that's nonsense. It's not going to work anymore. It's not going to do anything. They're going to be able to get your information before it's encrypted as you're typing it before you send it. Everything is going to be transparent. They'll have access to anything they want, anything you have on any device. It doesn't matter what kind of encryption and what kind of bullshit you're using. All that's out the window.
Happening right now is not in America's security interest. And President Putin said something actually very interesting in an interview in 2017. I think he said, I've dealt with 3 American presidents now. They come into office with ideas, but then men in dark suits and blue ties come to tell them how the real situation is, and you never hear of those ideas again. And this is from a very tough-minded leader who was himself KGB. He understands how the American system works very well. He understands what the CIA means for American foreign policy. He understands that American foreign policy is very deeply rooted. What we need is that the Pentagon and the CIA and the other intelligence agencies come to understand we're in a multipolar world. We face a nuclear superpower in China, a nuclear superpower in Russia, and so we need a different strategy. And then somebody in a dark suit and a blue tie will come to tell whoever's president that we're doing it differently now. And that's what we can hope for.
I have already talked with one US president, then another, and a third president. They come and go, but politics does not change. Do you know why? Because the power of bureaucracy is very strong. A person is elected, they come in with one set of ideas, and then people with briefcases come to them, well dressed in dark suits like mine, not with a red tie, but with a black or dark blue one. And they start explaining how things should be done, and everything changes immediately. Do you understand? This happens from one administration to another. Changing anything is quite a complicated matter. I say this without any irony. It's not that someone doesn't want to change things, it's because it's complicated. Look at Obama. He's a progressive person, very liberal-minded, a Democrat. Before the election, he promised to close Guantanamo. Did he do it? No. Why? Didn't he want to? He wanted to very much. I'm sure he did, but it didn't happen. He sincerely aspired to it, but it's not that simple. However, this isn't the main issue, though it is important. It's hard to imagine. People are walking around in shackles for decades without trial or investigation. Imagine if France did that, or Russia. We wouldn't hear the end of it.
We spoke to someone who had access to these still hidden CIA documents, a person who was deeply familiar with what they contain. We asked this person directly, did the CIA have a hand in the murder of John F. Kennedy, an American president? And here's the reply we received verbatim. Quote, the answer is yes. I believe they were involved. It's a whole different country from what we thought it was. It's all fake. It's hard to imagine a more jarring response than that. Again, this is not a, quote, conspiracy theorist that we spoke to. Not even close. This is someone with direct knowledge of the information that once again is being withheld from the American public. And the answer we received was unequivocal. Yes, the CIA was involved in the assassination of the president. Now, some people will not be surprised to hear that. They suspected it all along. But no matter how you feel about or what you thought about the Kennedy assassination, pause to consider what this means. It means that within the U.S. government, there are forces wholly beyond democratic control. These forces are more powerful than the elected officials that supposedly oversee them. These forces can affect election outcomes. They can even hide their complicity in the murder of an American president. In other words, they can do pretty much anything they want. They constitute a government within a government, mocking by their very existence the idea of democracy. As cynical as we have become after 30 years of watching government officials ignore the voters who employ them, we were shocked to learn this. It's not acceptable. Americans have trusted their government less with every passing year since the killing of John F. Kennedy. Maybe this is why. And people have known this for a long time. The people who knew would include every director of the CIA since November of 1963. And that list would include Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, one of the most sinister and dishonest figures in American life. That list would also include, we are sad to say, our friend Mike Pompeo.
One of the things that we learned from Donald Trump, one of the many, many things, completely changed my life watching it. One of the many things we learned is that the Republican Party, the leaders of the Republican Party, really despised their own voters. They had zero interest in improving their lives. And we know this because as 100,000 a year died of drug overdose, as their towns died from offshoring of industry, as their towns were invaded from people from foreign countries who were here illegally, they did nothing. Their attention was focused abroad to the Middle East and Eastern Europe. That's where all the money went. That's where all the prayers went. That's where all the attention went, because that's all they cared about. They didn't care at all about their own voters. And by the way, I didn't really know that. I think most people in this room sense that. You know when someone doesn't care about you, you can feel it. You can feel the contempt coming off them in oily waves. That's exactly what it is. It's contempt. Joe Biden's not the only one who thinks you're garbage, actually. Mitch McConnell agrees with that. That's a fact. And that's one of the reasons that they don't want Donald Trump back in Washington. But the main reason they don't want Donald Trump back in Washington is something called disclosure. Do you know what disclosure is? Disclosure means sunlight. Disclosure is the principle that you, as an American citizen, an equity owner of this country, not a renter, not a serf, not a slave, but as a citizen, an owner of this country, a person on whose behalf the government exists. There's no other reason to have the government except to serve you, that you have a right to know what that government is doing with your money in your name. It's not a privilege that you are granted. If they're in a good mood one day, you can know a little bit more about how John F. Kennedy was murdered in 1963. You have an absolute moral right to know because you own it.
There have been, a million documents released now, and and many of the people involved in the assassination have confessed. Many of them, and so if the evidence is so abundant and so definitive and dispositive. I'm an attorney. I was a prosecutor. If I had to try the case, where the CIA was on the dock, I could. I know that I could win in front of almost any jury in America beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah. I saw that video. I said, why would a president of the United States be riding in a convertible? That's a huge
back then, people weren't killing presidents.
Yeah.
So, now they wouldn't. But
do you know the reason?
We know the reason because the people who were involved were all people who were part of the Miami station, who were angry at him for not invading Cuba, and they were also angry at him for ending the war in Vietnam. And he had 30 days earlier, he had signed National Security Order 263, ordering all troops home from Vietnam.
In my last conversation with President Trump in the White House, he called me a lot. And this is after January 6th, so it's 2 weeks before, or a week before he's leaving office. He wanted to run past me the names of people he was going to pardon and sentences he was going to commute. He wanted my opinion on them. Some of them I knew. I said, how you doing? He said, not too well. And he went off into a tangent about what he thought happened with the election. I said, you made a promise to the public many times and to me privately that you haven't kept. What? I'll take care of it right now. I said, you promised you would release the records of the JFK assassination. He said to me, Judge, if they showed you what they showed me, you wouldn't have released it either. And I said, who's they and what did they show you? And then he said, Judge, someday when we're on the phone, and then he raised his voice, and there aren't 15 people listening to the phone call, back to a normal voice, I'll tell you.
Oh, my God.
I mean, this makes it sound even worse. Who are they? Probably somebody in the intelligence community. What did they show him? JFK's brains blown out?
This is it. It was said by one person that after the Kennedy assassination, there has been no president. They have only been factotums of the system since then. Yeah. It may well be the most decisive event in modern American history.
Right.
It turns out you're related to Angelina Jolie. You're also cousins with Madonna. That's true. So, and I'm related to Madonna and Halle Berry.
Related, in fact, to Abraham Lincoln. Your family is that true?
Nancy Hanks was Abraham Lincoln's mother. So, yeah.
Barack Obama and Sarah Palin are cousins, back to one Mr. Smith of the 1600s.
Like related, for real?
Yes.
What's the connect?
We're second or third cousins. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
You are related to Fred Rogers.
No, impossible. No, you're pulling our leg.
All right.
Let's look at that.
How far away is it?
Wait, look at it.
I know, yeah, I'm never.
Oprah tried to say that you two are somehow, some way related.
Yeah, she said she actually researched it and found it to be true.
And that's all.
Some kind of Presley with the Winfrey hooked up somewhere along the line in the South. You know how it goes.
Cousin Oprah.
That's right.
And that President Obama is related to all but one U.S. president.
Well, Dan, the youngster spent the summer tracing the family tree of our presidents. Her conclusion that all the presidents, with the exception of one, share the same grandfather.
That President Obama and all the presidents before him, with the exception of one, are related and descendants of a former king of England.
No, they are all cousins and they're grandsons of John Lackland.
Over the city, looking down on Washington, D.C., you'll see there are two main boulevards culminating in a pyramid. And just at the very top of the pyramid is a street cutting it off. And then within the triangle at the top, where the eye on the dollar bill is the Capitol. And the Capitol building sits there. It's a pyramid. Then it has the Cleopatra's Needle, which is a Washington monument. And the river, the long riverway and the long waterway is called the River Styx, which is where Pharaoh went into heaven on the River Styx. It is all laid out in Masonic symbolism, and the five-pointed star, which is a pentagram, has always been used. Satan worship, satanic worship, the five-pointed pentagram, and if you take the arms off of a pentagram, you have a pentagon. And the United States Pentagon is sitting exactly due north, aiming due north at the North Star Thuban, which is drawing power, according to the ancient Egyptians, for the god of war.
Just take a road map of Washington, D.C. Just take a look at it from the air, and you'll see what appears to be the goat of Mendez. And the goat of Mendez,
which is a symbol in Freemasonry. Right. It's a symbol. It's a demonic symbol within the Freemasonic.
You see the goat and the horns and the whole thing. The whole city is laid out like that. It's all over.
So what we're basically saying here is that there is nothing happening by chance.
I was looking at Biden's inauguration again, and I noticed none of the military had any ranks or honors on their jackets. So I decided to go back and look at other past inaugurations, and I noticed Bush, they had their ranks on their jackets. I looked at Obama. This isn't actually the inauguration, but it is a laying of the wreath. For some reason, the video wouldn't edit that I found for Obama's inauguration. But you can see here, they all have their military rank on their jackets. And the next one you'll see with Trump. Trump has his. And I want you to notice, too, that all three of them were able to touch the wreath and kind of push it back on the stand. But I want you to notice Biden's on what happens with his here, because his is different. Because remember, there's no military rank on any of the jackets anywhere. You can't find them. And you're going to see he doesn't walk down the steps. He walks out from the left if you're facing the tomb, which is weird. So you see there's no military ranking on any military officer there. They don't get to touch the wreath for some reason. They have to walk up to it and do this awkward, hey buddy, how you doing, kind of thing. And then they stand there, look at it, and then they turn around and walk back. So why? I also want to point out that they did the 21 gun salute with two guns actually at the cemetery when he arrived to the tomb of the unknown soldier. And then you got these three knuckleheads that showed up for some reason, which is weird too. And they showed up way before the family did, because you can see the family walking in. But I figured out why they did the 1 and 22 seconds of silence or awkwardness from my last video. It was because they were supposed to do the 21 gun salute after the president got sworn in. This is Trump's 21 gun salute directly after he got sworn into office as president. Now you can go back and you can find videos where you can hear Obama's going off, you can hear Bush's going off, but Biden didn't do it for some reason. And the military didn't have their honors on or their ranks. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Now, I want to read this about the 21 gun salute. It says, in accordance with the ceremonial standard operating procedure of the 3rd U.S. Infantry, i.e. the Old Guard, the various gun salutes are assigned as follows. Each round in a given salute is fired one at a time. The number of cannon used in a battery depends upon the intervals between each round fired. Now, I want you to notice that Trump had 4 cannons firing. Now, the military code says they want an odd number firing, so this isn't all that awkward with 4 of them firing. But I want you to look back at Biden's inauguration when they're laying the wreath and he's pulling up, that there's 3 cannons there. 2 are actually firing every 6 seconds, which will bring it to 2 minutes and 6 seconds by the time it's all done. Now, this is interesting here. a 3-gun battery firing 2 of its guns with 5-second intervals between rounds and 1 gun remaining at the ready in case of a misfire. Such a battery would be used at an armed forces full honors funeral or for a state arrival ceremony of a foreign dignitary at the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery. So they were firing 2 guns, that is right on with this, for a arrival of a foreign dignitary. What's up with that? I think you can figure that out now, can't you?
The next day, I'll never forget it, I went quail hunting, and I was driving back, and I got a phone call from Mike Pompeo's lawyer. Mike Pompeo was the Secretary of State, but before then, he was the director of the CIA. And in that position, he plotted the murder of Julian Assange. So he is a criminal as far as I'm concerned. But his lawyer called me and said, you should know that anyone who tells you the contents of classified documents has committed a crime. He's threatening me. This is in my car. With my dog sitting next to me, I'll never forget this. And I said, are you really saying that to reveal that the U.S. government had a role in the murder of a democratically elected president, to say that out loud, that's the crime? What about the actual crime, which is murdering a president? Like, you're covering up for that, Mike Pompeo.
What did he say to that?
He had no response at all. And so Mike Pompeo is the one who pressed Trump to keep those documents secret. And so it's like, what's crazy to me is not just that Pompeo did that. I think Pompeo is a really sinister person and a criminal. I think that because the facts suggest that. He was caught. Yahoo News, Mike Isikoff wrote a long piece on this several years ago. His employees went to Mike Isikoff and said, hey, Mike Pompeo is plotting to murder Julian Assange, who's never even been charged with a crime in the United States, as CIA director. That's illegal. You're not allowed. Federal employees are not allowed to just kill people they don't like. Okay, just to set the baseline here. So that's who Mike Pompeo is. But he somehow intimidated Trump into not releasing this. Well, okay, that's all bad, right? I think it's criminal behavior. What's crazy is how Mike Pompeo is treated. He's treated as like a Republican poobah in good standing. He fully expects to become the Secretary of Defense in a Trump administration, which is like completely insane. Why would you take a criminal and give him nuclear weapons? Okay, that's my view. I think it's a common sense view. And like, he goes to fundraisers and dinners and everyone's like, hey, Mike Pompeo. It's like, no, you're the guy who kept information the public has a right to know secret. You're the guy who plotted the murder of someone who committed no crime. You are the outlaw. You are the bad guy. But no, he's treated as like, like a pillar of Republican Washington. I think it's mind-bending to watch that. I saw Julian Assange in London.
I wanted to ask you
wouldn't put people in prison except for a very good reason. And they
talk about the truth.
Talk about the truth being illegal. Look at, he's paid for it with dozens of people.
Well, Assange has never been accused of lying or of fraud or of making money in some criminal scheme. Assange has been accused of telling the truth, period.
Yeah.
And they are torturing him to death in front of all of us. No one's doing anything about it. And that Mike Pompeo is a very, very sinister person.
Isn't he?
The worst. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that, and I've told Trump that. Never should have allowed him to run CIA or state. But Mike Pompeo tried to have him murdered. And that's a criminal act. He was not even charged with a crime in the United States. And Mike Pompeo was CIA director. This came out. Pompeo didn't deny it.
I never heard this.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
I saw it.
Oh, my God.
He tried to have Julian Assange murdered, poisoned in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And that's a fact, okay? Wow. And it's been established and, okay?
Yes.
Why is Mike Pompeo not in prison?
You can't talk about the Kennedy assassination without talking about Israel, without talking about the Mossad. They're the main people involved. That's the main group involved. The prime minister of Israel at the time said that without nuclear weapons, Israel would not survive. Kennedy was asking for neutral scientists to observe the reactor. He continued to push for this with CIA Director McCone and finally was granted access. Israel, prior to the visit, set up a fake control room with fake control panels, and part of the agreement was that the inspectors were never going to be able to inspect the actual reactor. After that visit, Kennedy was quoted in saying, "Those sons of bitches lie to me constantly about their nuclear capability." the Jewish community invites JFK to come to Dallas, which was sponsored by the Dallas Citizens Council, which was directed by Julius Sheps, who was a member of the local B'nai B'rith organization, the ADL B'nai B'rith, once again. A confirmed member of the local B'nai B'rith as well, Abraham Zapruder, was also just so happened to be the guy that caught the assassination on film. Zapruder was also a manufacturer headquartered in the Dallas Textiles building. According to ballistic studies, it was from that building the first two shots were fired and missed. The building was owned by David Weisblatt, one of the biggest financiers of the Anti-Defamation League, and Douglas Jaff, one of the biggest donors to Lyndon B. Johnson. The host committee that invited Kennedy to the event in Dallas was chaired by a guy named Sam Bloom. According to Dallas police, it was Bloom who pushed the hardest for the police to transfer Lee Harvey Oswald from the Dallas police station to the Dallas County Jail. Now, it was during that transfer that Jack Ruby shot Oswald. What was Jack Ruby's real last name? Jakob Rubinstein. The reactor went critical right after Kennedy died, and they got the bomb a year or two later. That's kind of a coincidence, isn't it? That's kind of a strange coincidence. Kennedy dies?
Just returned from seeing a complete motion picture of the moments preceding and the moments of President Kennedy's assassination and the shooting of Texas Governor John Connally. Here is what the motion picture shows. The automobile, the black Lincoln convertible with the top down, carrying in the front seat 2 Secret Service agents. In the middle or jump seat, Governor and Mrs. Connally, and in the rear seat, President and Mrs. Kennedy. Made a turn off of Houston Street on the fringe of downtown Dallas onto Elm Street. This was a left turn and was made right in front of the building from which the assassin's bullet was fired. After making the turn, and going about 35 yards from the corner of the building, 6 stories up in which the assassin had a window open. And keep in mind here that President Kennedy and Governor Connally are seated both on the same side of the car, on the side facing the building. Mrs. Kennedy and Mrs. Connally are on the side of the car away from the assassin. About 35 yards from the base of the building, President Kennedy, in the film, put his hand up to the right side of his face, the side facing the assassin. He seemingly wanted to brush back his hair or perhaps rub his eyebrow. Mrs. Kennedy, at this moment, was looking away or looking straight ahead. She was not looking at her husband. At that moment, when the president had his right hand up to this side of his face, he lurched just a bit forward. It was obvious that the first shot had hit him. Mrs. Kennedy was not looking at him, and nor did she appear to know at that instant that her husband had been hit. Governor Connally, in the seat immediately in front of the president, apparently either heard the shot or sensed that something was wrong, because Governor Connally, with his coat open, his button was undone, turned in this manner, with his hand outstretched back toward the president. And the governor had a look on his face that would indicate he perhaps was saying, "What's wrong?" or "What happened?" or "Can I help?" or something. But as Governor Connally was turned this way, his white shirt front exposed well to the view of the assassin, the governor was obviously hit by a bullet, and he fell over to the side. Governor Connally's wife immediately, seemingly instantaneously,
placed herself over her husband in a protective position, it appeared. And as Governor Connally fell back, President Kennedy was still leaned over at that moment. Another bullet obviously hit the head of the president. The president's head went forward violently in this manner. Mrs. Kennedy at that instant seemed to be looking right square at her husband. She stood up. The president slumped over to the side and, I believe, brushed against Mrs. Kennedy's dress. Mrs. Kennedy immediately turned and flung herself on the trunk of the automobile, face down on the trunk, almost on all fours. The First Lady appeared to be either frantically trying to get the Secret Service man who was riding on the bumper of the car, the single Secret Service man riding on that bumper, to come into the car or to tell him what had happened, or perhaps from the picture it appeared she might have been trying to get out of the car some way. The car never stopped. The Secret Service man on the front seat had a telephone in his hand. The car, its acceleration increased rapidly, and it disappeared under an underpass. The 3 shots, the first one hitting the president, the second one hitting Governor Connally, and the third one hitting the president, consumed possibly 5 seconds. Not much more than that, if any. That is the scene shown in about 20 seconds of film that the FBI has in its possession. The film was taken by an amateur photographer who was in a very advantageous...
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
هذه مناسبة انتخابية، إن كذبة انتخابية، باش تعرفوا مهزلة الانتخابات، إن الواحد يكذب على الناس لكي يعطوا أصواتها، وبعد يأتي التطبيق وينجح يقولون له هو أنت وعدت بكذا بكذا، يقولون لا هذه دعاية انتخابية. شوفوا مهزلة، هذه الديمقراطية. لا هذه دعاية انتخابية، فاكرينها قد فاكرينها مضبوط، نضحك عليكم اللي بياخذوا أصواتكم. إن شاء الله هي تكون هكذا مجرد دعاية انتخابية. لكن كونك هو يقول ان القدس ساعملها عاصمة الى الابد للاسرائيليين، هذا يدل على انه هو ان اخانا اوباما يجهل السياسة الدولية وما هوش مطلع على ملف الصراع في الشرق الاوسط. كنا نعتقد انه يقول انا قررت اذا نجحت سوف افتش مفاعل ديمونة لأتأكد من القنابل الذرية ومن أسلحة الدمار الشباب الأخرى عند الإسرائيليين، نبغى نتأكد منها ويدير قرار مثل هذا. لكن لابد أنه عندما فكر في هذا، لابد أنه فكر عندما كان يتكلم عن إيران وبرنامجها النووي، لابد أن تكون أمام ديمونة بكل تأكيد. لكن لما تكون قدامه ديمونة لابد أن يكون قدامه مصير سلفه كندي الذي قرر أن يفتش مفاعل ديمونة وأصر على التفتيش ليتأكد من أنه يصنع أسلحة ذرية وإلا لا. ورفض الإسرائيليون، وأخيرا أصر هو على التفتيش. كان المخرج من هذه الأزمة هو استقالة بن غوريون استقال حتى لا يوافق على تفتيش مفاعل ديمونة، وأعطى الضوء الأخضر بقتل كندي، وهكذا قتل كندي بسبب مفاعل ديمونة وإصراره على تفتيشه. بسبب إصراره على تفتيشه قتل كندي. لابد أن أوباما أمام هذه الصورة، وبالتالي لابد أنه كان يريد أن يتكلم عن هذا ولكنه يتراجع. الأمم المتحدة، الجمعية العامة المتحدة تفتح ملف اغتيال كندي الرئيس الأمريكي. لماذا؟ نبغى نعرفه. قتله واحد اسمه لي هارفي، جاء واحد اسمه جاك روبي قتل لي هارفي قاتل كندي. لماذا قتله؟ جاك روبي إسرائيلي قتل لي هارفي اللي قاتل كندي. لماذا هذا الإسرائيلي يقتل قاتل كندي؟ ثم جاك روبي قاتل كندي مات قبل إعادة محاكمته في ظروف غامضة. لماذا؟ أرجع الملفات. أنا اللي نعرفها والعالم ممكن يعرفها واللي درسها في التاريخ أن كندي قرر تفتيش مفاعل ديمونة الإسرائيلي، هل في قنابل ذرية وإلا لا، وعلشان كذا تم تخلص منه. الإسرائيليين لا يقاتلون ضد الفلسطيني فقط، يقاتلون ضد الأمة العربية. هذا قتال وجود وليس قتال حدود، وهم ينتظرون اليوم الذي يحل فيه المشكل الفلسطيني لكي يتفرغوا للهجوم على بقية الشعوب العربية. الخندق الفلسطيني يقاوم نيابة عنكم، يجب دعمه وحشد كل إمكانيات وراء الخندق الفلسطيني. إذا سقط هذا الخط ستتقدم القوات الإسرائيلية إلى البلاد العربية ومحيط الخليج. يريدون إقامة إمبراطورية إسرائيلية فوق الأرض العربية. ما تسمعوا حكاية الكلام مسيرة السلام، خداع، تدجيل على الجماهير. أي مسيرة سلام؟ مسيرة دمار ومذابح في لبنان، في سوريا، في فلسطين، في تونس، في ليبيا. الآن يدفن الفلسطينيون أحياء وهم أحياء في فلسطين اليوم. هذه فرضها الانحطاط وضعف العزيمة العربية. هذا الجيل، جيل الغرب، إلى الغرب الآن يريد تدمير الحدود وإقامة الوحدة وإقامة القوة ومواجهة التحدي بالتحدي وتحرير فلسطين. هذا يتحدي، أمة تتحدى فيكم، يجب أنكم تتحدوا هذه الأمة. لماذا؟ هل أنتم جبناء؟ ما عندكمش إمكانيات؟ أمة أمريكية تتحدى فيكم، يجب أن تتحداها، مش تطاطوا الرأس أمامها. ما تسمعوش أي كلام. يا وحدة يا تصبحوا زي الهنود الحمر، تسمعوا الهنود الحمر وإلى الأمام والنفاح مستمر.
The governor of Michigan used to work for George Soros. Who's the governor of Michigan? Think about it. California Governor Gavin Newsom is Nancy Pelosi's nephew. Just bear me out. Keep coming with me. Adam Schiff's sister is married to one of George Soros' sons. Who's George Soros? He hates the United States. He wants to turn the United States on its head. He put all of these progressives in office. He votes strictly Democrat. He supports strictly the Democratic Party. And he hates the United States. He said it. He hates us. John Kerry, we know who he is. Forget that guy. His daughter is married to a mullah's son in Iran. His daughter is married to a mullah's son in Iran. Understand the connection that I'm making here. These are all facts. I'm not making this up. ABC News executive producer Ian Cameron is married to Susan Rice, Obama's former national security advisor. You want to see the deep state? You want to see the mafia? You want to see how this all pulls together? You want to understand why certain things have happened in this country over the past several years? Keep listening. CBS president David Rhodes is the brother of Ben Rhodes, Obama's deputy national security advisor for strategic communications. So ABC News and CBS News both have people at the high level that were connected to Obama and the Democratic Party. ABC News correspondent Claire Shipman is married to Jay Carney, who is the former Obama White House press secretary. Look at the connection. Look at the mainstream media. Look at the deep state that we're talking about. This is mafia. This is all about control. Got to give them credit. They've done it right. ABC News and Univision reporter Matthew Jaffe is married to Katie Hogan, who is Obama's former deputy press secretary. Look at the connection here. Look at how it's all coming together. ABC President Ben Sherwood is the brother of Elizabeth Sherwood, Obama's former special advisor. Who do you think's calling the shots here? You know darn well Biden wasn't calling the shots. You know darn well Kamala Harris isn't calling the shots. And you know what I heard today? Somebody said it's okay. We hate Trump so much we don't want him to be president, and we know Kamala Harris is incompetent, and we know she's not in control. This was a Democrat saying this, but it's okay because she'll send representatives. Obama's really pulling the strings. You know, they'll fix it. If they have to go meet with Putin or they have to go meet with China or Iran, they'll send somebody in her place. They're admitting she's a puppet. And they're admitting that they know it, but they hate Trump so much, a guy that's capable, that they'll vote for her anyway. These are the people that we have. Understand, CBS, ABC, all in the pocket of the Democrats and George Soros. CNN, Vice President Virginia Mosley is married to Tom Nides, former Hillary Clinton's deputy secretary. Why are they hiring all Democrats? Why are they hiring all people that are related to the Democrats and none to the Republicans? Think about it. Mafia? You bet. All about power and control. They've been installing these people. They've been controlling the media. This is what it's all about. Let's keep going. This is what you call a stacked deck. If you had a hunch the news media was somehow rigged and you couldn't put your finger on it, this might help you solve the puzzle. Now you know why no one is investigated. They all have their hands in the cookie jar. You might remember James Comey, remember? Head of the FBI, who investigated the Clinton email scandal and the Clinton Foundation and made the final decision to not recommend prosecution by the DOJ. Well, listen to this. It turns out that Clinton Foundation was audited by the law firm DLA Piper. One of the executives there was in charge of the Clinton Foundation audit. Who was it? Peter Comey, James Comey's brother. Why wasn't she investigated to the full? Why wasn't she indicted? She should have been indicted. She obstructed justice. We know that. We know that there was bribes coming into the Clinton Foundation, but James Comey's brother was in charge of the investigation. This is mafia, people. Take my word for it. And it only gets worse. It gets worse. This family tree will make your head spin. The swamp is deep. And yeah, I wrote this all out. The swamp is very deep. And this was sent to me, and I just re-edited some of the things so that I can make it simpler for you to understand. All right, but this is what you got here. This is the real mafia. It's why I wrote the book. I saw this years ago, people. You got to give the Democrats smart. They did the right thing. They weren't as underhanded as Republicans. And I'm not saying Republicans are lily white. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they don't match up with the Democrats' strategy because they're underhanded. They'll stop at nothing. They don't care about violating the law. They installed all of their people in the right place. We used to do that too in the mob. Put our people in the right place in the union so that we can control them. Get our people close to government officials so we can control them. This is exactly a mafia democracy. This is what I'm talking about. Listen to this. Dominion. Remember Dominion? There was controversy about them. They're the voting machine provider. They serve 40% of the U.S. market. It's in 30 states. The state of Texas rejected the machines, and they did that for a reason. Admiral Peter Neffenger is on Biden's transition team. Neffenger was president of the board of Smartmatic. Watch the succession here. Smartmatic, another voting machine supplier, entered into an agreement with Dominion in 2009. Peter Neffenger, he was on Biden's transition team. He's part of Smartmatic, and now Smartmatic enters into an agreement with Dominion in 2009. Smartmatic counted votes in Venezuela. Smartmatic is connected to the Philippine voter fraud. Remember that whole incident? Voter fraud in the Philippines. Dominion, Smartmatic. Smartmatic is run by Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who works for George Soros. Here we have Soros again, pulling the strings in the background, putting things into place. This is mafia stuff, without a doubt. He and Brown are lifelong friends. George Soros and the guy who operates Smartmatic, Mark Malloch Brown, are lifelong friends. Brown chairs the board of a number of nonprofit board foundations, including the Open Society Foundation. Brown chairs the Center for Global Development. Open Society, of course, is owned by who? George Soros. Look at the connection here. Look at the connection with the media. Look at the connection now with these voting machines where we had controversy. Remember Trump complaining, people complaining in Arizona that the Dominion, there was something wrong there? Who controls this? Listen closely. Smartmatic partnered with DLA Piper Global. Douglas C. Emhoff, who is that? The husband of Kamala Harris, works at DLA Piper Global. So now you got a connection to Kamala Harris with the voting machines. Douglas C. Emhoff, of course, Kamala Harris's husband. Guess who owns Dominion? Blum Capital Partners. Guess who is on the board for the company? Richard Blum. Guess who Richard Blum is? Dianne Feinstein's husband. Do you see how this all ties together to the Democrats, all the progressives? You have people in government in the Democratic Party that were controlling the outcome of Hillary Clinton and other things. And now you have the voting machines, Dominion, that surfaces 40% of the country is all tied up with the Democrats. And we have controversy about all of these things. Richard Blum is Dianne Feinstein's husband. Nancy Pelosi's husband is also a major investor in the company. Nancy Pelosi, she despises Donald Trump, despises him. Her husband is on the board, controlling Dominion. An aide to Nancy Pelosi, Nadim El-Shami, was hired by Dominion Voting Systems. Well, it was an aide to Nancy Pelosi. They're not hiring Republicans. They're not hiring people close to Trump. They're hiring all Democrats. This is mafia stuff. It's all about control. And look at the control that they are having now. And it goes on and on. Dominion Voting System is listed on the Clinton Foundation website. Dominion Voting is listed as a $25,000 to $50,000 donor to the Clinton Foundation in 2014 by the Washington Post. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You must remember the Feinstein, Kavanaugh, Soros connections to understand this next information. Deborah Katz, who was Christine Ford's lawyer, remember? She was the one that made the allegations against Kaufman. Remember that. She worked for George Soros at the Open Society Foundation. Her lawyer, Christine Ford's lawyer, the one that made the whole stink and falsely accused Kavanaugh, okay, her lawyer worked for George Soros. Kamala Harris, listen to this, did not prosecute One West Bank for their fraud when she had the authority to do so, and Soros owned One West Bank. Do you see how this is all tying together? I can go on and on and on. But now you know why a woman who placed seventh, she placed seventh in her own state when running for vice president, is now the vice president and now the Democrats' nominee for president after overthrowing Joe Biden. But these same people who are all corrupt will tell you Trump is the problem. He's the liar, he's the felon, and that he's a threat to democracy, and mean tweets have upset you.
A quick message to the American people. I know sometimes when things are said coming from Africa, people do not tend to take it seriously overseas. But I would just like you to take a minute and listen, because we have been following some of these issues for quite a while ourselves here. What you call the deep state in the US, the deep state with all these conspiracy theories about assassination of your leaders or people disappearing, JFK and all that. Well, the deep state is Israel. And what you call the Uniparty is Israel. What you also call the swamp, Israel. Thank you.
As Christians in a Christian country, we have a right to be, at minimum, agnostic about the leadership being all Jewishly occupied.
We literally should be at war with fucking Israel 100 times over, and instead we're just sending them money, and it's fucking crazy.
Look at the state of Israel, look at the state of Tel Aviv, and look at the state of Philadelphia. You tell me where this money's going. You tell me who's benefiting from this.
I am prepared to die in the battle, fighting this monstrosity that would wish to enslave me and my family and steal away any rights to my property and to take away my God. Go fuck yourself. Will I submit to that?
And if you've got a foreign state, you've got dual citizens in your government, who do you think they're supporting?
God, right now, would you protect the nation of Israel and protect those of us, not just our church, but every church in the world and in this nation that's willing to put their neck on the line and say, we stand with them.
You can look at Trump's cabinet, you can Biden's cabinet, it's full of Jews.
I have a black friend in school. I have nothing against blacks. She has nothing against me. She understands where I'm coming from.
Excuse me, I'm a Jew, and I just like to say that, in our Bible it says that you're like animals.
The Jews crucified our God.